Hi Year Fives and welcome to Thursday's maths lesson. Well done for making it to the end of the week for maths. And we're not looking at 3D shape anymore this week. We're going to look at describing positions in the first quadrant on a coordinate grid. We're going to be thinking about 2D shape again and thinking about describing positions, and then next week we're looking at reflections and translations using 3D shapes and coordinates. So this is your first lesson that's going to help you with all of those things. So we'll start with the review task, which is a review of coordinates basically. Think back to when you did coordinates, Christmas coordinates, just before Christmas, and think back to your line graphs lessons as well, because that will help you with the axes. Pause the video now and see how you get on. Okay, so let's jump right in. Which axis is the x-axis? It's the horizontal axis. And the y-axis is always the vertical axis. Hopefully you remember that. And now we would need to actually plot the coordinates for the different letters. So let's start with A, which is here. I'm going to draw a dotted line just because it will help us match up where our line crosses over the different axes. You might want to use a ruler or a pencil if you haven't done so already, just to make sure it's really accurate. So we always read the coordinates x and then y. You might remember the little phrase along the corridor and up the stairs, or x comes before y in the alphabet. However you remember it, as long as you do remember it, that's fine. So dotted line, here we go. So I'll go along my x-axis and I can see that A crosses the x-axis at coordinate 3 and it crosses the y-axis at coordinate 5. So to write my coordinate, I will use a bracket and then I'll do my x-axis first and then my y-axis afterwards, always in that order, and then I'll close my bracket. Let's just do the next one just to make sure everyone's really happy. So I'll look at B now. I'll go along the x-axis and see where B crosses the x-axis. If I have my line, it will cross at 8 and it will cross the y-axis at 9. And it's handy because all of those letters are actually on the lines, so you can use the lines to be really accurate. So let's write the coordinate now, bracket. Let's have the x coordinate, which is 8, and then the y coordinate, which is 9. Hopefully you agree with me. Okay, does it matter which way around you write the numbers? Well, yes, it does, and I'll show you why. If we kind of made a mistake and I thought, no, it doesn't matter, and I did 9, 8 for B, and I asked somebody to find where B was, they might get a bit confused, because if I show you where coordinate 9, 8 actually is, the conventions, the rules say we've got to use the x-axis first. So I'll go to 9 on the x-axis and then up to 8. And actually, I would think that B is here, so I'd be really confused. So we always do x and then y. Now I've gone ahead and I've just filled in the other coordinates, so please stop the video and check now. Okay, hopefully you got on really well with that. Don't worry if you made a mistake though, it's easily done. Just think about what you would do next time. Success is a squiggle, so as long as you are learning from your mistakes, that is fine. Please now apply your new learning, or your really strong 100% learning, to guided practice 1. There are some more coordinates to find, and then I want you to plot your own letters here. Okay, pause the video now. Okay, so some of the coordinates I've actually pre-written, so you can check these now. Do you agree with me? Okay, so hopefully you do agree with me. I just want to talk about why we use brackets here, because I've taken the coordinates and I've just put them like a long list here. And I think that if I didn't have the actual coordinates there, if I get rid of those, and I wrote my coordinates for both letters like this, it would be really unclear which numbers were for which coordinates. I wouldn't really know, would I? And so that is why we use brackets, because it really clearly shows that we have got two different axes. We've got our x and our y in both cases, and we can see what they are. Okay, so I haven't put on C and D. I'll come back to C and D. There's E. Hopefully you agree with E. Let's do C and D now together. C and D, I wonder if you can think why I want to go through these. Okay, so let's look at where C is. It's a bit confusing because C is actually at 0 on the x-axis, isn't it? It's on that line that kind of the y-axis is being represented along. But this is still an x-axis point because we can see all the x-axis numbers here, can't we? And 0 is here. So our coordinate for C would be 0 on the x-axis, and it goes up to 8 on the y-axis. So 0, 8. And D is similar, isn't it? It goes along to 10 on the x-axis. But then if we read back at where it crosses the y-axis, it's at 0 on the y-axis. So hopefully you weren't misled by those. Okay, finally, we need to plot letter F at 9, 10. So I need to go along to 9 on the x-axis and up to 10 on the x-axis, y-axis, sorry. So letter F would be on the edge of our coordinate grid, which is fine. We can have coordinates on the edge. We could even have coordinates going further up, couldn't we? We just need to extend our axis. Now let's look at G. So I need to go to 0 on the x-axis, which is right back here, and 0 on the y-axis, which is on the same point. So I hope that didn't mislead you. G is where those two axes actually cross over each other, so that perpendicular angle. Okay, now I want you to have a little look at describing the position of a polygon. So first thing I want you to do is name the shape and describe how you know. And then I want you to write the coordinates of the vertices of the shape. So remember what vertices are from last week and this week. Pause the video now and see if you can do those things. Okay, so hopefully you were able to name the shape because you realised that the squares can help you here. So I would use the squares to measure the lengths of the sides. And I can see that this is 4 squares long, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 4 squares long, 4 again and 4 again. And I've got 4 right angles. So this must be a square because it's got 4 sides. It's a quadrilateral and the sides and the angles are the same length. The angles are the same. So you might have written something like this. I know that this is a square because it is a 4 straight-sided shape with all sides the same length. Something like that would be perfect. Now, let's look at writing the coordinates of the vertices of the shape. So who labelled the vertices of their shape? Hopefully lots of you did, because that is the easiest way to kind of communicate what the different coordinates are. If you just write a list of coordinates, it's really hard for somebody to work out which coordinate is for which vertice. They'd have to actually work it out each time. So I would put a dot on the corner of the vertice of each part of the shape, and then I would use letters or another way to label it, A, B, C, D. And then I'd be able to write my coordinates for each one. So if you haven't done this already, pause the video now and make sure you look at the coordinates for A, B, C, and D. Okay, so here's some that I created earlier. So just we might want to double check this. So I'm looking at A, so I can see 3, 8. Yep. B is 7, 8. Good. I can see D. Sorry, C, let's go to C. C is 7, 4, and D is 3, 4. So they're all correct. Okay. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed something, but I can start to see a little pattern here. You might want to pause the video and see if you can see a little pattern. We're going to explore this pattern later, but if you're already thinking deeply, that's a really good skill. Okay, guided practice 2. I want to describe the position of the shape. 2 coordinates out of 4 have been plotted. So first thing I want you to do is describe the position of the plotted points by writing the coordinates. Remember that you might need to label these vertices. That could help you actually communicate the different points. Then I want you to plot the missing points and write their coordinates. And then I want you to think about the pattern. So compare all 4 coordinates. So pause the video now and see how you get on with that. Okay, so plotting the points that we are already given, I would label this point A and I would label this point B. And I might even start by joining them up because I know that I'm going to make a square. Okay, so I can think about coordinate A and coordinate B, and I already have. So here are some I made earlier. So A is 4, 7 and B is 8, 7. Hopefully you agree. Now I need to think about my missing points, and I need to think about the properties of a square. So I know I've got a 4-sided shape here, so I know that all the other sides need to be 4 sides as well, and I need to keep my right angles. So I need to draw a line that comes straight down from B and goes 4 squares long, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I need to draw a parallel line that comes straight down and goes 4 squares. And then I need to do another parallel line to AB. I can label my vertices. So if I label this vertice C and this one D, now I'm ready to plot those missing coordinates and write what the coordinates are. So hopefully you have the exact same points as me. Now I actually wrote them before, here they are. So there's C, 8, 3, and there's D, 4, 3. Hopefully you agree. Now I want us to compare the coordinates. So pause the video now and have a look at what's the same and what's different. And remember, because this always puzzled me, just remember that we always have X first and then Y. So you might want to think, what's the same about the X-axis? What's the same about the Y-axis? And what does that mean? Pause the video now. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can have a look at some of these patterns. So I can see that if I'm comparing A and B have got the same y-axis, haven't they? And so let's look at what that means. Both A and B have a y-axis point of 7, and so that creates a straight horizontal line between them. So even though the y-axis is vertical, when we've got the same y-axis, it looks like we've got a horizontal line. I can see another same y-axis between D and C. The y-axis is 3, so let's look at if it's the same. So between C and D, we have another horizontal line when we have the same y-axis, even though the y-axis is vertical. It's a bit strange, it's the opposite, isn't it? So I wonder then what the same x-axis means. Let's look for some of the coordinates that have the same x-axis. So I can see A and I can see D, they both have 4 as the x-axis. So let's compare A and D. So I can see between A and D, we've now got a vertical line, okay, because both x-axis points are 4. So that creates a vertical line. Now let's just check that out. So B and C, they both have 8 as their x-axis. And let's compare B to C, it creates another vertical line. So we can make some generalizations from that, can't we? When we have a y-axis that is the same, we will get a horizontal line. And when we have an x-axis that's the same, we will have a vertical line. We've just got to remember it's the opposites of how those axes are normally labelled. Have a think about this a little bit more. So have a look at these coordinates that I've given you. I haven't actually plotted them because I want you to think about your comparison and what you've just learned. What's the same and what's different? And what kinds of lines would you end up with here? Pause the video now. Okay, so here is how I would group them. I would put these together, same x-axis, so I'm looking for 3 and then another 3, and then I've got 5 and then another 5. Let's just check on the grid the kind of line that we would get. So if we've got 3s on our x-axis, we would end up plotting points along this line here, and we would end up with a vertical line. And I can see 3, 3 is there, and 3, 8 is there. So those points would be on that straight line. Let's double check with 5. So there's 5 on the x-axis. It would be another vertical line. Now let's look at the same y-axis points. So if I take 3, 8 this time, I'd need another 8, because that's the y-axis, it's the second number. So there we go. And now I'd need to have 3s as the y-axis. So let's look again. I'll use a different colour for the y-axis. So if we had both points along 8 on the y-axis, it would be along this line, which is horizontal. Let's check again. So if both y-axis points were 3, it would be along this line. So we've just proved our point, haven't we? You might want to think about that because there's a challenge next. And I want you to think about plotting a capital letter on a grid. But before you plot the capital letter, I want you to pause the video and look at the coordinates and make a prediction for what kind of letter it might be. See if you can see any x-axes that are the same, and remember what that means, and any y-axes that are the same. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what I can see. Hopefully you can see the same as me. That was rhyming, wasn't it? So I can see that we've got 7 and 7 here. So that's points along the same y-axis points, isn't it? So that tells me that we might have the same, a horizontal line in our capital letter. But I can also see here that we've got the same x-axis points. Sorry, I can see even more. I can see, yeah, the same x-axis points here. So perhaps we're going to have some vertical lines as well. So I wonder which capital letters have got horizontal lines and vertical lines on their shapes. Let's think about that for a moment. So it could be an H, couldn't it? Or it could be a J with a curve at the bottom, or it could be a capital I if it's got those 2 lines either side. So let's see what we get. Okay, I'm going to plot the points. Actually, you need to pause the video too and plot the points if you haven't already. Okay, let's go. So 3, 7 is there. And then I need to go along to 5, 7, which is there. Now, let's look at the next one. It says 3, 3. So let me plot 3, 3. And 5, 3 is just further along the x-axis. Now I need to plot 4, 7. So if I go back up here, and then 4, 3 is here. That's interesting. So if I just connect those lines, that wouldn't create a letter, would it? but I think I can see a letter if I connect these lines and then I do a vertical line and then a horizontal line. It creates the letter I. So that's one that we thought. Is it what you predicted as well? Okay, last task that we're going to do together, and then you'll have all the tools you need for your independent practice. So pause the video and make sure you read all of the information for this one. Don't miss anything out, and think about how you might solve these problems. Okay, so let's start to solve the problem. So it says write the coordinate for C. I'm just looking at the scale and I noticed that the scale is slightly different to the one we've been looking at. So we're going to need to make sure we look at scales as we do our independent work. I can see here that point C, if I use my dotted line again, point C is actually halfway between 4 and 5 on our x-axis. We've got 2 squares for every one, haven't we, for every one unit. So I'd need to think about what this person is saying. How could I describe what is halfway between 4 and 5? We'd need to think about the scale in between each one, like when we were doing our line graphs. So hopefully you can remember that we could say 4.5, if we've got exactly halfway between 4 and 5. I could write 4, and then I could actually write the fraction half next to it, like that. And another way to show half would be 4.5. So I know that 5/10, add another 5/10 would make a whole 10. A whole 1. Yeah, we did that just before Christmas as well, didn't we? Decimals. So 4.5 is 4.5. This is 4.5, and this is 4.5. There are a few ways we can write it. And that tells me that we can write coordinates with decimals or halves or fractions. So let's just finish this off to write the coordinates. So coordinate C, I know the x-axis is 4.5. I'm just going to write 4.5 because it's easier for me. And let's look at where C crosses the y-axis. It's at 0.4. So that is the coordinate. Now it says plot and write the coordinate of another vertex that would make this an irregular polygon. So we know it needs to be a quadrilateral, a 4-sided shape, or a 4-vertice shape. We've got 3 vertices, so we need 1 more to make it irregular. And irregular means that the sides are any length. So I could put my vertice anywhere. Maybe I could put it up here, and then I could join my final 2 lines, there, and that would make an irregular quadrilateral. I wonder where you put yours. Okay, now it's time for your independent practice. So have a look at the questions. Use the skills that you've been taught this lesson, and you've also got some deeper thinking questions to try out too. The answers are at the end, so please don't skip ahead. And I hope that you enjoy recapping coordinates and thinking a bit more deeply about them in terms of describing where polygons and letters and things go. Send your work into Year 5, we'd love to see it, and have a great weekend. Bye.